What Next is brought to you by Progressive. Are you thinking more about how to tighten up your budget these days? Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average, and customers can qualify for an average of 6 discounts when they sign up. A little off your rate each month can go a long way. Get a quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary. Discounts vary and are not available in all states and situations. This episode is brought to you by Charles Schwab. Schwab's passion for serving clients is more than just standard practice. It's part of who they are. With transparent pricing, 24/7 live support, and a satisfaction guarantee, the people at Schwab go the extra mile to help you on your investing journey. They are not just financial people. They're people too. Learn more at schwab.com/whyschwab. Hey everyone. This week, as 2022 comes to a close, we're going to revisit some of our favorite episodes from the last year. Today, I'm going to share a conversation I had back in March about the origins of the opioid crisis and an attempt at some accountability. At the time, one of the largest opioid manufacturers in America, Purdue Pharma, was in the midst of a legal battle. Purdue is led by the wealthy Sackler family, and the Sacklers themselves had just agreed to cough up billions of dollars in exchange for complete immunity against future opioid litigation. We spoke to NPR addiction reporter Brian Mann about whether this trade-off was fair. All right, here's the show. At any one time, NPR's Brian Mann is probably following about a dozen legal proceedings, all of them seeking some kind of accountability for the opioid crisis, but none of them quite like the hearing he went to a couple weeks back. This was in bankruptcy court. It was over Zoom. What made it remarkable were the 24 people giving searing testimony about the way addiction had upended their lives.
And let me just say, bankruptcy courts don't usually do things like this. This is not a normal thing in bankruptcy court to have victim testimony like you might have in a criminal case or in some civil cases. But this judge said this felt right to me. And as part of the agreement, 3 members of the Sackler family did agree to sit through it and to watch it and listen as these families held up photographs of the dead and talked about what they'd lost. It was powerful and heart-wrenching.
To the people testifying, the billionaire Sackler family is a bunch of high-end drug dealers, executives who led Purdue Pharma as that company aggressively marketed OxyContin in doctors' offices and hospital wards all over the country. One parent forced the court to listen to a 911 call that still haunts her. In it, she'd just found her son dead from an overdose.
One of the things that kept being said by these family members over and over again is that you, members of the Sackler family, deliberately tried to label people with addiction as criminals, as the problem. They are the people who created this epidemic. They're the bad guys in this story. And what people kept saying to them was, we want you to see us. We want you to see that we were a real family. We had careers, we had hopes, we had a mortgage. We were sending our kid to college, and then he came home in a body bag.
This hearing was part of a settlement deal. The Sacklers, they've said they'll give up control of their drug company. They'll even cough up $6 billion. But in exchange, they want to be shielded from personal liability.
A lot of people, including the U.S. Justice Department and others, have said, is that how justice is supposed to work? We don't really think so. That said, I spoke to a bunch of these people who testified, and they clearly felt that it was an important ritual. There is something human and profound about having a moment to confront a person that you believe did something terribly wrong.
It's interesting you say that the family members felt like their ability to testify was a kind of relief. Because it sounds like you're saying it may have felt like an emotional release, but it's very unclear whether real accountability will happen here.
For people in that room, these family members, remember, they've been forced to live in this space for a long time, seeking justice, wanting some accountability. And at the end of the day, here's what I'm hearing from them. They think this is the best deal they're going to get. They think this is the closest they're going to get to justice.
Today on the show, with 500,000 Americans dead, what does accountability in the opioid crisis look like? And is this accountability at all? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina is the beach. It's also the perfect place to enjoy the holidays. Here, you're going to get all the holiday cheer you can handle, plus 60 miles of beaches and endless fun. Sometimes you need a holiday from the standard holiday. Maybe you want to escape the cold. Maybe you want to start a new tradition. Myrtle Beach is the place to do all of that. They've got themed shows at the Grand Street. They've got Winter Wonderland at the beach, which features massive light displays and a brand new family fun zone. They've got holiday cheer everywhere you look, like at Brook Green Gardens' Night of 1,000 Candles, where more than 2,500 candles and twinkling lights take over the Grand Botanical Gardens. There are not many places where you can celebrate the holidays or ring in the new year with a big ol' ocean view. Take a holiday from the average holiday season at the beach. Plan your getaway to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina at visitmyrtlebeach.com. This episode is brought to you by Schwab. Do you ever think about your money? Sure you do. You probably think about it all the time. But guess what? Your money's been thinking about you too. And it wants you to know that a financial plan can lead to 2.7 times higher net worth on average. That's why Schwab makes starting one easier than ever, with one-on-one guidance from a financial consultant and a complimentary online retirement plan that you can start in as little as 15 minutes. Plus, track your progress with free digital planning tools. So what are you waiting for? Visit schwab.com/plan today to learn more. How did the Sacklers become the focus of so much anger from families and, of course, litigation, too? When did that start?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the Sacklers were brilliant at managing their image for a long time to distance themselves from opioids and from the main product that Purdue Pharma, their private company, made.
Yeah, I mainly knew them as like the name on art galleries, not anything else.
Yeah, and medical facilities and universities. And I mean, they were everywhere as one of the leading philanthropic families in the world, not just in the U.S., but in the world. And there was also a very careful effort to sort of, when they would talk about their wealth to the extent that they did, it was not connected to, where did all this money come from? And I want to be fair here and contextual here. There were a lot of people, regulators, law enforcement, doctors, pharmacists, all kinds of corporations that were all part of this. The Sacklers and others were donating crap tons of money to create think tanks and endowed chairs and new medical wings. So everybody got pulled into this vortex. Everybody was making money off of opioids. Opioids were a great quick fix for a lot of medical problems. So, hospitals and doctors loved them. But slowly, as the opioid crisis deepened, there started to be more and more reporting connecting the dots back to this company. And there started also to be investigations that happened. And this is really troubling. I mean, as early as 2007, which is pretty early in the opioid crisis, the Justice Department had clearly figured out that this company was doing really dangerous things.
What do you mean when you say that?
Well, basically what they said was, you're marketing opioids. You're this very addictive, very dangerous, medication that probably should only be used in the most extreme cases, end-of-life care, cancer, sickle cell, things like that. You're marketing it to doctors and to hospitals that they should give it out for, relatively minor things. And you're assuring them that this new formulation that you've created is far less addictive. And we don't think the evidence really supports that. And in fact, as early as 2007, Purdue Pharma pleads guilty to federal crimes that they had marketed OxyContin improperly.
This was a watershed moment for the Sackler's drug company, or it should have been. 3 executives, including the company's president, pleaded guilty to misbranding opioids. That's a criminal offense. The company agreed to an independent monitor and to pay $600 million in fines.
But what we've learned in the years since is that almost as soon as that deal was cut with the Justice Department, members of the Sackler family started pushing again for even more aggressive sales of opioids. This is after we knew people were dying. We knew addiction rates were soaring. They partnered with a consultant called McKinsey, and McKinsey promised to turbocharge their opioid sales. That was their term. We're going to turbocharge these sales.
After this agreement with the Department of Justice.
After this agreement. And so again, in 2020, 13 years later, Purdue Pharma pleads guilty again to federal criminal charges, admitting that they continued to market and push the sales of opioids improperly. And so this is a company that has twice pleaded guilty to federal criminal charges for pushing these very dangerous drugs during years when hundreds of thousands of Americans were dying.
At this point, thousands of lawsuits have been filed against Purdue Pharma, which has driven the company into bankruptcy. For the Sackler family, though, this bankruptcy has been an opportunity. As a condition of settling their company's financial affairs, the Sacklers have demanded full immunity from civil liability for themselves, even though the family is far from bankrupt.
Basically, the very simple way of thinking about it is that to use this maneuver, you find something that you can stick into bankruptcy that's relatively disposable.
Like a company, an asset, something that you can just get rid of.
Yeah, a subsidiary, right? Here's a subsidiary. Or in the case of Purdue Pharma, here's this company that's bankrupt. And the Sacklers say, okay, yeah, the company is bankrupt. That ship is sinking. We're standing over here safe on our island. And we're also facing a wave of lawsuits that could swamp our island, right? But what we'll do, hey, here's our idea. We'll contribute X number of dollars to that sinking ship problem that you have out there that is bankrupt. And in exchange for that, we're immune. We're no longer part of this at all. So that's the trade-off. You want a little bit more money out of that sinking ship? Fine, we'll contribute. But then in exchange for that, we're going to demand immunity from any role or any, lawsuits going forward. And what lots of companies and organizations have found is that they can find something to throw into bankruptcy that's relatively worthless, and then they contribute X number of dollars to that process, and their rich organization or their rich individuals or their rich family, in trade for that contribution, they get a clean slate. They walk away. And that's what we're about to see happen with the Sacklers now. They're at the finish line as we speak.
You say that the family's never acknowledged any wrongdoing, but they haven't been completely silent. I noticed that you were at a different hearing in December 2020 in front of Congress where the Sacklers actually spoke. What did they say there when confronted by lawmakers about what they'd done at Purdue Pharma?
The narrative that they put forward is that they were ethical and lawful board members. And to the extent that Purdue Pharma has acknowledged criminal behavior, they say they were not aware of it. And there's this remarkable moment when Dr. Kathy Sackler, who was on the board, said, based on what I knew then, and I'm paraphrasing her here, but she says, I don't know what I could have done differently.
I have tried to figure out, is there anything that I could have done differently knowing what I knew then, not what I know now? There's nothing that I can find that I would have done differently.
What's interesting is that when you hear her voice, she sounds reflective. She talks about, I struggled and I looked back at my role. And that's what stood out to me. It sounded like she really knew how to say the words, but it was hard to know if they were genuine.
It's really challenging. I've been reporting on the opioid crisis now for several years, and I've listened to a lot of different corporate executives testify, talk about their role in making decisions that just factually did flood the country with these highly addictive, very dangerous opioids. And I hear that tone of voice a lot. People talking about their decisions in ways that they're just they're clearly struggling with it to some extent, but at the end there's just kind of this shrug. There's this like, what could we have done differently? And I don't know how to interpret it. I can't get into Kathy Sackler's heart, obviously, or the mind of all these other executives, but this resistance to accountability is profound. And let me just say, just stepping back from what's in their hearts and minds, the other thing that does leave somebody like myself kind of, I don't know, sort of, I don't know what to say about it, is that, we're a society that locks up a lot of people for selling drugs, right? We put a lot of people behind bars for a long time for selling drugs. And the fact that we look at people in corporate America who sold massive quantities of drugs at times when it was clear that those drugs were devastating whole communities, the fact that there is no clear mechanism to hold them accountable, it raises questions that I just can't answer.
We'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive. What's one thing you'd purchase with a little extra savings? A weighted blanket? Smart speaker? That new self-care trend you keep hearing about? Well, Progressive wants to make sure you're getting what you want by helping you save money on car insurance. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average, and customers can qualify for an average of 6 discounts when they sign up. Discounts like having multiple vehicles on your policy. Progressive offers outstanding coverage and award-winning claim service. Day or night, they have customer support 24/7, 365 days a year. When you need the most, they're at their best. A little off your rate each month goes a long way. Get a quote today at Progressive.com and see why 4 out of 5 new auto customers recommend Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who save with Progressive between June 2020 and May 2021. Potential savings will vary. Discounts vary and are not available in all states and situations.
So let's talk about this bankruptcy settlement and what it might mean. If it's accepted, if it goes through, it's $6 billion. How is that money theoretically going to be distributed?
Well, one of the things that is really cool about this is that it kind of goes beyond theoretically. And again, you're right. There are a couple of moments that still have to come before this deal is finalized. But if it is finalized, it has been structured in a really deliberate way to funnel the money into drug treatment and healthcare and harm reduction to actually ease the opioid and addiction crisis. And so they've entered into this very solid set of agreements that will funnel the money out to states, and then from there down to the local government level, where there are very sort of clear pipelines that will send the money to public health departments. It'll send the money to do things like foster care programs in areas where so many parents have died or fallen into addiction that children need that kind of care.
And families themselves can apply for compensation, right?
Yeah, there is at the center of this, there is about a $750 million fund that is, a compensation for victims. But I think it is important to say, and this has been controversial, the lion's share of this money is not going to victims of past addiction. The lion's share will go to actually easing the crisis going forward, and will go towards helping more people get treatment, more people get the medical care that they need to stop this. And this has been a central part of the discussion. It's weird because it's in a bankruptcy court, but a lot of the time the conversation has turned toward how can this bankruptcy process fix this massive social crisis that's killing, more than 100,000 people in the U.S. now every year. How can this actually help? And I will tell you, this is a little ray of sunshine here, that a lot of the public health experts I talk to think this will move the needle. It's not going to solve it. It's not enough money to begin to solve it, but it is something that, there will be more people getting care.
Brian says the good this agreement will do, it'll be multiplied by money coming out of other, even bigger opioid settlements. In one case, from over the summer, 3 other drug distributors reached their own deal to give up $26 billion, money that can make a real difference in people's lives. There's a dark side to this cash flow, though. In Purdue's case, at least, the money going to victim compensation is going to come, in part, from the continued sale of opioids. And then there's the issue of the Sacklers themselves, who many see as ducking accountability.
What a lot of people are saying is, hold on a second. Wait, that's not how American justice is supposed to work. If I want to sue the Sacklers, I should get to go to court and make my argument. That's what the Constitution promises me under due process provision. And what you're saying as a bankruptcy judge is you can build a firewall around them. That's crazy. And, lots of people are really alarmed by that, including the U.S. Justice Department, which has declared this whole arrangement unconstitutional. So there are big critics of this sacrificial animal process. But so far, it keeps making its way through and being signed in. And that's what we're about to see happen with the Sacklers now. They're at the finish line as we speak.
Yeah. I want to talk about that immunity and how far it goes. Because at that hearing the other day, one of the people who testified was a criminal court judge, a guy named Bill Nelson, whose son died of an overdose. He seemed really frustrated that Richard Sackler wouldn't show his face. But he also made the point that, I put drug dealers away with a single rap of a gavel, and I do it without blinking an eye. And I wish I could do the same to you. Why can't there be criminal charges here? Or why aren't there?
In the paper trail of this long interaction between law enforcement and regulators and Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers, there clearly have been moments when the Justice Department and others have come up to the line and really strongly considered bringing criminal charges against at least some members of the family. That's never happened. Instead, they've entered into these deals. They've secured payments from the Sacklers. And in speaking to legal experts about why this happens, I think, first of all, it's important to just say that it's very hard to hold corporate actors accountable for criminal behavior. You have to have really big smoking guns. You have to have just very clear intent. You have to have, the paper trail has to be almost, unavoidably clear that there was, some kind of criminal conspiracy that happened. And what seems obvious is that the Sacklers and Purdue Pharma have worked very aggressively to make sure that those charges were never filed. They've negotiated very aggressively. And I think it is also, when you look now at whether the U.S. Justice Department or a state attorney general might take on some kind of a criminal probe or a criminal prosecution, it would be a very big legal fight against a family that has very deep pockets to hire, the best legal team in the country. And I think that it's so far at least been, that's a windmill that no prosecutor has been willing to take on.
Sounds a little bit like they've been able to pay their way out of accountability.
I think that's the obvious takeaway for a lot of people. Yeah, I think that's there is, let me just say this very simply. The Sacklers are going to pay $6 billion in exchange. Let's just talk about the civil lawsuits again for a second. In exchange for immunity from civil lawsuits. That's a luxury that most of us cannot afford. I mean, I cannot, I'm guessing you cannot go to any court in the country, bankruptcy or otherwise, and say, I have enough money that I can pay into a settlement, and in exchange, I want to never be sued over something that I'm accused of again, right? And so that's just clear that is what's happening here. They're going to pay for walking away. And in terms of this, this other question, this controversial question about criminal charges, again, to be clear, what the Sacklers say is we just did nothing illegal. So, you would be, barking up the wrong tree. But what others have said is that, the Sacklers have managed this very carefully so that, criminal accountability would be difficult to prove. It would be difficult to, weed through all the regulatory decisions, all the moments when, their business decisions were channeled through lots of other actors and lots of other players. It would be very difficult to bring that back to their doorstep and win that case. And so I don't think there's a strong chance that they'll ever face criminal charges.
Huh. I mean, you've covered so much of this opioid litigation all around the country and the legal settlements. And I wonder how you, as a reporter, come down at this moment on how these legal remedies work and don't work for the victims. Because it sounds like the subtext of our whole conversation is that the legal system allows for all these loopholes and ways for individuals, but also companies to manipulate a complicated system.
Yeah, it's terrifying, honestly, because that clearly happened. And clearly, I've heard judges, I've heard victims, I've heard regulators all say the entire system here did fail. And in some cases, it failed by design, lobbying of Congress, defanging of regulatory agencies, hiring former regulators to come work at higher salaries in these big pharma firms. There was this whole ecology where a lot of people made a lot of money and made their careers because this was just a profitable business. And they did that while more and more people were dying. And I think through this legal process, there have been reforms, there have been efforts to reach new agreements with the drug industry to tighten up their act and to get better. But the fact that this all happened kind of out in plain sight, that everybody sort of let it keep going on, even as we saw more and more people dying, it's not a pretty picture. And it's a really big question that I think about a lot. Like what is the next thing like this? Like if we allowed something this obviously destructive to keep happening, not just for a year or two, but year after year, what else will regulators look the other way over? What else will law enforcement decline to really lean in and prosecute because of, powerful interests? It's really scary.
Brian Mann, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Brian Mann covers addiction for NPR. If this settlement is finalized, even after paying $6 billion, the Sacklers will remain one of the richest families in the world. When we spoke with Brian back in March, he said this opioid settlement with the Sacklers was not quite finalized. Months later, that is still the case. But the Second Circuit Court of Appeals is expected to come to a final decision soon. And that's our show. This 2022 Look Back episode of What Next was produced by Mary Wilson, Carmel Delshad, and Elena Schwartz, with a little help from Laura Spencer and Anna Rubinova. Our new production team includes Madeline Ducharme, with help from Anna Phillips, Jared Downing, and Victoria Dominguez. Our head of ad production is Ben Richmond. This episode is brought to you by Charles Schwab. Schwab's passion for serving clients is more than just standard practice. It's part of who they are. With transparent pricing, 24/7 live support, and a satisfaction guarantee, the people at Schwab go the extra mile to help you on your investing journey. They are not just financial people. They're people too. Learn more at schwab.com/whyschwab.
This episode is brought to you by Best Buy. Whether you're searching for exciting gifts or trying to snag the hottest holiday deals, Best Buy is here to help. From air fryers for the aspiring foodies in your life to smartwatches your fitness friends will love, Best Buy is your gifting destination for everyone on your list. Best Buy makes it easy to get your gifts how and when you need them with free next-day delivery on thousands of items, as well as same-day delivery and in-store pickup options. Shop great deals on gifts now at Best Buy.